Hey, this is Sheena with Crooked Calligraphy. I've got my camera here because I am going to show you the basics of modern pointed pen calligraphy today. It only takes 4 tools and it is so much more doable than it might look because I know it can seem intimidating, but I'm going to use my corporate lawyer brain and my 8 years of calligraphy teaching experience to break it down for you in a simple way without any overwhelm and no extras. So you can actually do this thing. Excited? Let's get into it.
So these are the 4 basic tools that you need for pointed pen calligraphy. I know you see a lot of shiny, fancy gadgets out there, but that can be really overwhelming. So I want you to stick to these 4 affordable basics. Nib, nib holder, ink, paper. That's all you need. Nib, I prefer the Nico G nib. It's a really beginner-friendly nib, medium flex, sharp but not too sharp, very durable, and is not as finicky as some other of the finer, sharper, advanced nibs. So Nico G, other G nibs, pretty similar. Zebra G, that kind of thing, but Nico G is my preferred go-to. Nib holder. This is the Speedball Plastic Oblique. I like this because it's just easy to find and really affordable and really sturdy. So the reason it's called an oblique nib holder is because there's a flange, that's what this is called, that sticks out to the side. And this flange is what holds the nib. I will show you that a little bit later. For right-handed people, usually the flange sticks out to the left, and that just allows you to get the slant, the right-leaning slant that's usually required in calligraphy. Left-handed people, a lot of left-handed people just use the same orientation of the oblique holder and just kind of rotate their arm or rotate their paper. I'll give a few tips for left-handed people later on in the video. That's your oblique holder. Ink. So Sumi ink is my preferred beginner calligraphy ink. It's really nice and black, easy to use straight out of the bottle without having to add any water or anything. If you decide to purchase my No BS calligraphy kit that I sell through John Neal Bookseller, makes it really easy, just gives you these 4 things. It will come in this handy dandy 2-ounce size jar, but my preferred brand, what's in the jar, is Moon Palace Sumi ink. So you can also opt to buy this bottle and then get a separate little container to dip your ink into. This is what I do on a daily basis. So that is calligraphy ink. Finally, paper. Paper, like every other thing here, super important. You can't just use any paper for calligraphy because if you notice, this ink is very watery and it will not work with most regular papers. It'll just bleed and feather. So you want a special calligraphy paper or a heavyweight printer paper. I like HP Premium 32. The brand doesn't really matter, it's just that it's a heavyweight paper. So 32 means 32 pounds. That's the weight of the paper, or 120 GSM if you are outside of the US. And that's, again, just a regular printer paper. I like it because it's fairly affordable and easy to find, at least here in the US. So that's it. Those are the 4 tools you need, and next I'm going to show you exactly how to use them. Here's how to use these tools. The first thing you need to do is insert your nib into your nib holder. Now, you might be able to see in this video that there is a circular opening here in the flange, and your nib is just going to get inserted into that opening, right? So you want to insert it carefully because it is sharp, but far down enough that it's snug and won't slip out. The most important thing here is to make sure that your nib is rotated properly, right? So the easiest way to see if that's correct is to lay your oblique holder down on the, flat surface, and you want that vent hole to be pointing straight up to the ceiling. What is a vent hole? A vent hole is that hole there in the top of your nib. So the cool thing about nibs, pointed pens, is that they flex and they separate. Do you see that? The tines separate when you push down. So these are the tines, the pointy bits. The vent hole is there at the base of the tines. The vent hole, it kind of helps to hold on to the ink. And then the rest of this is the nib body. So when you lay that holder flat down, you want the vent hole to be facing straight up to the ceiling. You do not want it like this. That's not right because the vent hole is facing this way. This right? The vent hole is down, so that's upside down. You want the vent hole facing straight up. Next thing you need to do in order to prepare, most beginners skip this step and it's really, really crucial, and it's a reason why their calligraphy just doesn't work. You need to prep the actual nib. Nibs that are brand new from the manufacturer come with a coating that helps to keep them from rusting while in transit, but it also keeps the ink from adhering properly. So when I dip into ink and this nib has not been prepped or cleaned properly, you can see that it's just, the ink is not coating evenly. It's beading up, it's uneven, and it's not going to flow down in the way that you want. So how do you get the coating off of this nib? There are many different ways that people use, but I actually like to use kind of it seems a little gross, not gonna lie, but it's very effective. I use saliva. So I'm actually gonna get a clean paper towel here. And what I do is I just spit into the paper towel and I use that to wipe my nib. Okay, so this is just a regular kitchen paper towel. I might do that a couple times. Okay. And what the saliva does is it has enzymes in it that just remove that coating in a really effective way. I find this works even better than scrubbing with dish soap or any of the other methods that are out there. And there's some crazy methods out there like fire and potatoes, but this is the method I prefer. So I'm going to get some just clean water for a final clean. Oops, got some water on my paper there. That's okay. And here's the test. Voila. So much more evenly coated, right? You can see that there's still a tiny little spot there that doesn't have ink on it. That's okay. This will still work. If that bothers you, you can just kind of continue to wipe that off and put spit on it until it is completely evenly coated. And that's what you want your nib to look like before you start writing. All right, we're finally ready to start writing with our nib. I want to make sure that you all have gotten this downloadable guide at startmoderncalligraphy.com. It goes through all of the tools that I've gone over with you, exact links where to get them, including the No BS starter kit, so you can get all these tools, in one go and not have to hunt around for them. It gives you written instructions on everything that I've covered here, just so you don't forget. And finally, it comes with this very handy dandy worksheet so you can start practicing with your nib. So I'm going to do some writing on this worksheet. One extra tip for you is I always have some extra pieces of paper underneath the paper that I'm writing on. So I'm even going to grab a few more, and that just gives you some padding so that you're not directly against the hard surface of your desk. You have, your nib has something to kind of dig into. All right. So these are just some practice strokes, and you can see that this is how I like to set up all of my supplies. Because I am right-handed, I can dip right into my ink. I have my water here and my paper towel for cleaning off my nib. And before I get into writing, I'm going to show you how I dip into ink, because there's a correct way to do that too, believe it or not. You don't want to dunk your entire nib just fully in. You want to get coverage right up to the vent hole. So I'm going to dip just so that the vent hole is covered, and I'm going to wipe the top of my nib against the edge of the jar. So you can see that the vent hole is fully black with ink, but it's not gone too far up the nib body. You don't want too much ink on there because it'll just blob down and ruin whatever you're trying to write. So this is a good amount of ink. And you know how I showed you before that the tines open up when you push down? That's what we're going to start with. The very basics are heavy downstrokes and light upstrokes. So you want to push down probably harder than you think. Unless you're very heavy-handed, a lot of people are kind of afraid to push down really hard. They're afraid they'll break this nib. It's very sturdy. It's made out of steel. It's very hard to break unless you're using it improperly. So I want you to pay attention here. But as long as your nib is lined up with the way you want the downstroke to go, right? And the tines are opening up evenly. You can kind of even see that here when the ink runs out, how the tines are opening up evenly, and you can get that very heavy downstroke. If that happens, this is called railroading. When the ink runs out, no worries. You just dip back in and continue going. Okay, you can kind of fill in if you need to, and then you just kind of keep going. All right. Next, we're going to do some light upstrokes. And when I say light, I mean light. You want to go really, really, really light up. I heard one of my teachers say, pretend like you're drawing on the surface of a blown up balloon and you don't want to pop it. So as light as you possibly can, that's how you get your light upstroke. And that's the basics of calligraphy. This is where you get your contrast between thick downstroke and light upstroke. All right. Now we're just going to alternate between heavy down and light up, and you'll notice that the slant has changed, right? The angle of this stroke. So this is to get you practicing. I want you to turn your nib so it's going the direction of the downstroke, right? Especially when you're doing a downstroke, you want to make sure to face the same direction that the downstroke is headed in, right? So your nib wants to be lined up with the downstroke, okay? And then again, line up and go light up, change the angle, go heavy down, change the angle, go light up, change the angle, go heavy down. Okay, so you can see how that just kind of gets you familiar with your nib. All right, let's move on to varied pressure. And this, again, is just to get you even more familiar with the limits of your nib. So you're just gonna go pretty light at first on that downstroke, and just get heavier and heavier and really see how much you can get those tines to open up. All right, I've noticed something here. I've got a little like fiber, paper fiber stuck in the tip of my nib. If you notice that, you want to just kind of try and get that off. And if your nib is starting to dry on your nib and feel a little like caked up on there, just rinse in water, wipe with your paper towel. You want to do that occasionally so you have a nice clean nib. All right, varied pressure when it comes to this like W stroke here. So again, just practicing changing the angle of your nib. Go a little heavier, light, go heavier, light, go heavier. Okay. I'll wipe off my nib again, just to make sure it's clean. Redip, and then I'm going to tackle this. So this is going to be harder because it's a connected, right? You're going all in one fluid movement, but this is to get you starting to play with transitions. And transitions are just when you're going from light to heavy, back to light. You can pause and adjust your hand whenever you need to. Heavy, back to light, and back to heavy. Okay, so this is going to be way more challenging because you're not lifting up your nib. You're practicing heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light. All right, and then the most challenging strokes are, again, connected ones where you're doing some loops. And again, you just want to go really, really light. Transition to heavy as you come around, really, really light. Transition to heavy. Now remember, as you're watching me do this, that I've been doing this for 8 years. So this looks easier than it actually is. This is going to be really challenging at first because you're not used to going so lightly up. You're not used to writing with a pointy metal thing, for crying out loud, right? So give yourself some grace. Understand that it's challenging. This one's just kind of an upside down version, but kind of same idea. You're going to transition into heavy and then back to light. Move your hand, reposition it when you need to. Heavy and then transitioning to light. The hardest parts are when the nib is moving sideways and up. So all those thin parts, those are going to be the hardest. Take extra time there and go extra slow. All right, final exercise here is the most challenging. because you're looping in both directions. Light, transition to heavy, back to light. All right, and notice that my nib is still, I'm angling it to face the direction. There I've railroaded, no worries, just redipping to face the direction of that downstroke, and then going super, super, super light on those thin parts. All right, so I've given you places where you can trace, and then you can try it on your own. And remember, the point here is not to be perfect with this thing, but to start to get familiar with how the nib flexes, how it feels going really, really light up, how the ink behaves and moves off your nib. Pay careful attention, go extra slow, give yourself extra grace. That's the best you can do right now in the very beginning stages of this. To round this off, let me just give some quick tips for left-handed people. I know y'all often feel left out, but this is totally doable for you too, I promise. So the most important thing when it comes to left-handed calligraphy is getting the right positioning of your paper and your arm so that you can write under, right? Your hand can be under the line of writing, so you're not smudging your hand across as you write. So when I do left-handed calligraphy, like to turn almost a full 90 degrees clockwise, okay? So you'll notice that that allows me to put my hand down, and notice I am using my left hand, but I still have my oblique positioned this way with the flange sticking out to the left. I just find that this is the best angle to help me get under the line of writing, but still kind of see my nib and see the strokes that I'm creating. So the basics are all the same. Angle of the nib, dipping into the ink, all of it, right? But you're just going to have to adjust the position of your hand and your paper. And you'll notice that if I can get under the line of writing, I am not smudging as I'm moving across, okay? So I'm gonna do the same here, and y'all, I am right-handed. I am not left-handed, I am not ambidextrous. You can kind of see there in my light upstrokes, the shakiness, the fact that I am not used to using my left hand, and I taught myself how to do some calligraphy just to show left-handed people that it is possible. If I can do it, you can totally do it. And there's so many amazingly talented left-handed calligraphers out there. So let me try a little bit of this. And it's the same idea. You still want to angle your nib so that you're facing the direction that you want your downstroke to go. And you can see here, because of the way my paper is angled, and because of the fact that I'm using a flange that sticks out like this, I am able to write without smudging. And I can still see what I'm writing, right? That's often something that left-handed people have a hard time with, that your writing instrument kind of blocks what you're working on. Okay? So I'm not going to do all of these, but I hope you get a really good sense there of how doable this is, as long as you get your positioning correct as a left-handed person.
All right, so make sure you download the No BS guide to getting started with point and pen calligraphy so you can get all of the tools and the printable worksheet so you can get started practicing. Because I know you're probably excited to make this finally work. And if you feel like you need some extra practice pages, maybe like a daily practice workbook to teach you your basic strokes and your lowercase letters, I've got a special deal for you. Once you sign up for free to get this guide, a really, really awesome discount on my best-selling calligraphy practice workbook. So go to startmoderncalligraphy.com, download this guide for free, and get that special discount offer on my practice pages thing. I'm really excited for you to dive in. Calligraphy has completely changed my life, and it can be such a wonderful, relaxing, useful, practical, beautiful hobby. So let me know if this was helpful. Thanks for watching.